Hello YouTube, my name is Matthew, and today I want to ask George Orwell's famous question, why I write. Now that is a title of one of his essays, and I read the essay a couple years ago, but I'd have to reread it. I should probably reread it again, because I don't remember. I remember the general gist of what he said, but I don't remember a lot of the details. But point being, I think it's a legitimate question, both for the individual to ask and for someone to ask about writers in general. I mean, first off, there's the very basic answer, which is you write to preserve your thoughts or preserve information. So Charles Darwin wrote on the origin of species to preserve his scientific breakthrough that the diversity of life on Earth came about through evolution by natural selection. And then Saint Augustine of Hippo wrote the Confessions in order to preserve the insights he had acquired through his life experience, and in order to inculcate Christian values into the broader social world he lived in. But I think the question goes deeper than that. At least when we're talking about creative works, like essays and novels and plays and poems, etc. And I am somebody who definitely does a fair amount of writing. I'm not very disciplined about it. I should be, or want to be, I should say. But at the moment, at least, I'm not very disciplined. I just kind of write, a little bit here and there in various, and I dabble in or explore various literary genres. I have attempted and abandoned quite a few novels in the past, for example. I've written a fair amount of verse and attempted plays and screenplays. I've written a few short stories over the years. But why? And I've written certain introspective essays as well. And that's putting aside the many writing assignments I've done for school. But why write at all? Why write for fun? Is another way of putting it, I suppose. And it's interesting. I remember the British philosopher, or no, I think he was born in Switzerland, but then he went to England. Alain de Botton. I remember reading a profile of him in, I think it was The Guardian, although don't quote me on that. I remember reading a profile of Alain de Botton on some website, and he said, he hopes his children aren't writers, because if you're a writer, then there's something missing in your life. There's some emotional turmoil you haven't dealt with properly, and the only reason people write is sort of to fill a void in themselves, to grapple with certain anxieties and fears and trepidations. And then I remember reading another article about, I think it was about compulsive writers, and the author was kind of saying, like, you write, or I write, to escape the pain. I write all the time to escape the pain that I feel in various moments, or the emptiness I feel, or the meaninglessness I feel, excuse me. But on the other hand, then you have, I think this is well, I read somewhere this is a Susan Sontag quote, but I've seen this applied to so many people that I don't know who actually said it at first, but Susan Sontag might have said, writing is freedom. So it's not necessarily that, I have a burden that I'm carrying around and I get rid of this burden by writing. It's like I'm expressing the depths of my being in a positive, creative fashion by writing. Through the act of writing, I am actualizing my liberty, my freedom. I am self-actualizing. And of course, all these philosophical questions, like most philosophical questions, I don't really have good answers to, or at least I'm not able to come up with a very systematic thought process related to these questions. But I think there is something to the idea that, at least in my case, I think I write because I haven't always felt like I had the ability to express myself. And so if you don't feel like you're necessarily expressing yourself fully when you're interacting with your peers or your family members or whatnot, then you can turn to writing as a surefire way to, actually fully express yourself, because all you need is a pencil and a piece of paper, or a word processor on a computer, or all you have to do is open a notes app on an iPad or whatever. And there's various ways. It's very easy to be able to write. If you're not writing necessarily to publish, or if you're not writing online or something, you pretty much have total free reign. You can write anything and about anything. You can express yourself totally clearly, as and without worrying about being offensive, or without worrying about controversy, or getting locked up or whatever, because no one's going to see it. So you write. So there's definitely that emotional component to it. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say I'm using it because there's something wrong with me, or I'm using it to fill a void inside me, but I am definitely using it to express things that I don't normally express, or express things that I'm not able to express in other ways. But on a more positive note, I think I use writing as a tool for thinking. Whether that's fiction or nonfiction, I write to kind of better understand myself and the world, and I feel happier, or I feel more fulfilled. I feel more in touch with myself and the world when I'm writing. I feel like I'm able to think better when I'm able to write about something. If I'm able to write about something, then I'm able to turn the abstract into the concrete. So I think, there's definitely something to this idea of that writing is freedom or whatever, or writing is an extension of critical thinking. And so it's hard for me. It's almost hard to put into words like what you do when you're writing, because at some level it's unconscious. At some level you don't really know what you're doing. You're just kind of doing it. The creative juices aren't. It's not always clear to the individual what, where he or she or they are getting their ideas, and how he or she or they are making the creative juices flow. That just kind of happens or doesn't happen. And so at some level it's almost like asking the question about why you write is beyond the ability of the writer to understand. It's sort of something that, if you'll forgive the phrase, possesses you. So if I have an experience, maybe it will inspire me to write a poem, and so I'll spend a couple weeks kind of writing the first draft of a poem, and it's not necessarily clear to me why I'm doing it, or not necessarily clear to me where I'm getting the ideas. Just I had an experience and I was like, oh, I want to write about this, and I want to write about this not just in plain language, but I want to write about this in a way that is a bit more or I want to use simile or metaphor. I want to use figurative language, imagery. I want my writing to be a bit more visceral. So it's like, okay, I'll write a poem, and then I just spend a lot of time, tweaking the language and deciding, kind of meters to use, or whether to rhyme or not, or stuff like that. I guess I've been thinking about this because I'm in a class where I'll have to write a research paper pretty soon, and I was thinking of writing that research paper on writing itself. Because the class itself is based on George Orwell's novel 1984, and I guess what struck me in that novel was the fact that Winston began to write in a diary, and that was a crime, or in his universe, the main character, did I say the main character's name Winston Smith? I don't know if I did or not, but the main character's named Winston Smith, and he, spoilers if you haven't read the novel, he doesn't like the people in charge. He doesn't like the party. And one day he buys this diary from the store, and he begins to write in it. But that's a crime. It's a crime for him to write in that diary, in that journal. He's not allowed to do that. He doesn't have the freedom to do that. That goes against the party doctrine. And then something else I've said to a couple people today is, there's a reason that slave masters in the United States, for example, although this isn't, this didn't only happen in the United States, but in a situation where you have masters and slaves, there's a reason the masters don't want the slaves to be able to read and write, because if the slaves are able to read and write, then they're able to both read about new ideas and then kind of write down their own ideas and share them with other people. And so when you're able to read and write, it's just a whole another world is open up to you, and that gives you a certain level of power and influence that you don't have if you're not able to read or write. So then, I guess to kind of tie it back to the psychological, or the psychoanalytical, you could say that I write to gain. You could say that I write, or people in general write to have a certain level of control over their experience, have a certain level of control over the world. If I can write an essay and give it to, share it with other people, that might mean, or that means I'm interacting with the world in a way which is different if I did not write an essay and share it with other people. Or even if you don't even necessarily have to share it with other people, if you just write an essay and then read it back on your own, there's still some power in that, because at least you learn a bit more about yourself, or at least you learn a bit more about what you think, and how you think. So again, I mean, I'm with all these vlogs, I'm always just kind of rambling. But those are some thoughts I had related to writing. I do hope to be a sort of a professional writer one day. Not to say that I'm necessarily want to live off of publishers' advances or whatever, but I definitely want to publish stuff someday. I definitely want to publish articles or books someday. I just have yet to kind of write anything substantial enough for me to say, I think this should be published, or I want this to be published. But that is a kind of a goal of mine. I want to say, I published that book, or I published this collection of essays or whatnot. I published this memoir, I don't know. I want to be able to say that, I contributed this to the world. Partly for I suppose more self-serving reasons. I like to write, and I just like the idea of having something that other people having a book out that other people can read and critique and whatnot. But also because I know how powerful books are for me. There's a funny little Voltaire quote. I'm always talking about Voltaire. I'm way too obsessed with Voltaire. Anyone who knows me can tell you that. But he said somewhere, books rule the world, and then he added, at least those in it which have a spoken language, the others do not count. So there's Voltaire being his, witty, irreverent self as usual. But that's sort of minus the second half of the quote, perhaps. Books rule the world. They rule my world anyway. Maybe they don't necessarily rule other people's worlds as much as they rule mine, but books have ruled my world. I can't necessarily say this book came to me as I read this book and it was a revelation, or I read this book and it changed my life. I'm not necessarily being I'm not trying to romanticize, I guess, what it is like to read, but I still think that books have played a very important role in my life, and they continue to play a very important role in my life. And I guess at some level I wish to be able to say, or I hope for the possibility that, say I publish a book and it can help people in the way that other people's books have helped me. Because I guess I'll say one more thing, and then my video's kind of going on and on a bit, so I'll try to wrap up. But so Socrates, the famous Socrates, he was against writing because it wasn't conversation, basically. He's probably also against it in the sense that it can spread misinformation. But it can spread misinformation because you're not able to interrogate the author. So if I read, I can't think of a book off the top of my head. If I read Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche, I can't interrogate Nietzsche on his ideas. I mean, one, he's dead, but two, even if he weren't dead, I don't know, I wouldn't know Nietzsche, or I don't know Nietzsche, in this hypothetical world where Nietzsche's not dead. Like, I don't know him, so I can't interrogate Nietzsche. I can't talk to Nietzsche. I can't say, hey, this passage on page 42 is insane and ridiculous, and you should retract it, or you should stop. Not, you shouldn't believe that. That's not true. That's wrong. That's bad. But in a conversation, you can do that, and that's what Socrates was known for. He was known for talking to people and just asking questions, and his goal was to try to get people to kind of think more about their own ideas. But with a book, you can't do that. With a book, the thoughts, the feelings, the sentences are just there, and they just stay there, as long as the book is in print. But needless to say, I think that's sort of a short-sighted, or sort of a one-sided view of books and of writing, because even if I'm not able to interrogate the authors of certain books, even if I'm not able to say, hey, Ben Shapiro, I read this book of yours and I dislike your argument here, or hey, Nietzsche, I dislike your argument here, I'm still able to engage with those people. I don't know why I used Ben Shapiro and Friedrich Nietzsche as my examples, but I did. And I've never actually read a Ben Shapiro book. Beside the point. You can still engage with the author. You're just not engaging with the author in the same way that, say, I'm engaging in conversation with my best friend. That's a different form of engagement, but they're still both engagement. And so I can, so I still find it a profoundly powerful and moving and helpful experience to be able to read other people's writings, hear their arguments, hear about their experiences, hear about their thought processes, hear about their worldviews, and it helps me. Both it's just enjoyable because I like learning what other people think, but it's also it's helpful for me to understand myself better, understand the world better, understand other people better, understand various subject matters better. So it is definitely a way to cultivate your critical thinking skills. So yeah, I mean, that's sort of some thoughts I had related to writing. I don't know if there are any, how helpful any of them are, but I let that stand. I'll let my statement stand. So thank you for watching, and take care.